Welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. I am Josh Blazer, and we have another very lively chat ready for you this week. Join me, my co-host from Casual Game Studio, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I am doing well. As you can see, my beard is progressing, so which means I've had a very fruitful dev week. Other than that, I'm trying to see if there's anything other than out of the ordinary. No health updates yet. How are you doing, Josh? I know there's some smoke going on over there. People wearing the Dyson air cleaners. Did you get you one?
No, I just stayed inside. I just went in hermit mode. Yeah, we had the Silent Hill fog roll in.
Yeah.
And it was causing a lot of trouble. Just all misty and just horrible outside. You know, just normal stuff. When we talk about, if we get to Elden Ring at some point, we'll talk more about Khalid, because I think it's turning more and more into Khalid, it seems, every week.
Yeah, hopefully by then I'll get to finish it. So I'll get some extra time to finish it. Because last time you asked me, did you finish it? And I got booed off stage. So I'm going to at least have it finished by then.
Other than that, for me, just still doing work, getting books done, have to do Windows repair. I think I'm trying one last thing to fix an issue. And then that means reinstalling all the stuff, because that's another thing everyone loves to do, is have to reinstall all your programs.
Yeah, exactly.
Alright. But for our topic this week, this is something that popped up about, I think it was like 2, maybe 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
At this point. Hey, Pony. You won't watch me reinstall Windows. There we go. Put in new Windows. That
if it wouldn't drop when it's like resetting and updating, it would be a good stream.
Mm-hmm.
If you could do it somehow.
I could do like chopping a bamboo with a chainsaw stream. You want to see me handling a chainsaw?
Yeah.
That'll be my Doom Eternal 2 highlight reel.
I like it.
Alright, but our topic this week. A few weeks ago, IGN got called out once again for a video where they were talking about indie games and why they don't cover a lot of them. And they said basically the sentence that every indie developer likes to hear. That is, if they haven't heard about your game, then chances are it's not good, or it's not good enough to be reviewed by IGN. And of course, that went over incredibly well with indie devs, right?
Yeah, it's something we love to hear from IGN. It lets us know that they definitely support us and they're looking out for our best interests. So to me, that was a very positive statement from IGN.
Mm-hmm. You can feel the love there.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like I feel like they had interns and they hired them and they were like, "Look, we just need love. Put on this message statement," and it was just they did it perfectly. Yeah, I didn't get to read. I was digging it. You said they scrubbed it, and I cannot find the original one when they posted it. It was like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. By now, I can't remember. I got lost during the shooting. The shooting podcast.
Yeah. But yeah, they got rid of that very quickly, but I'm sure someone somewhere has an archive of it. And it definitely highlights again, like, this kind of issue when it comes to indie game coverage, and even just, I guess, like, even just getting your name out there these days. And one of the reasons why I label this Indie Coverage 2023, of course, is that every year, every 6 to 8 months, it feels like, something changes the conversation when it comes to covering indie games, what indie games are hot, and all that. And it has certainly changed a lot over the past 10 years. And I guess we can start there and kind of work our way forward. As everyone remembers, indie coverage really started out as kind of like this almost like weird thing, you know, like, hey, I found this weird game on someone's website somewhere. I found a file planet, or how much can I date myself? A GameSpy video or file somewhere, And we download, and it's such a weird game, but, I don't know if anyone's actually going to play it. You remember those days, right?
I definitely remember those days, yeah. And I mean, I could not even imagine, like, I mean, of course, we talked, we've talked about, like, back then, like, indie devs were, like, interested into getting into AAA. Eventually, that was the thing, right? Or to get, I mean, there wasn't a lot of companies that were trying to stay fully indie. They were trying to get to that echelon of AAA, or at least AA, because that existed at the time as well. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. But I think coverage was nearly impossible. And again, it was like considered like, here's this quirky game, check it out. I don't know, and they, and then whatever got covered was so rare, and yeah, it took. I mean, yeah, we were still downloading, like you said, trailers from GameSpot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and stuff like that. And so, I mean, I was thinking if we could go further back, even to like magazine coverage, like what was even indie coverage in magazines. I asked someone who describes themselves as a doomer zoomer, I believe is what they call it. I said, "Do you know what a magazine is?" And they said the things that you read. And I said, "Yes, the things that you read." And they have. And I said, "Well, we used to have magazines about video games and like different things." And they were like, unbelievable. So yeah, that.
Did you like turn to dust when they said that?
I almost did. Luckily, I had the magazines in front of me to protect me. But yeah.
Yeah, like, and again, like, for the youngins watching this right now, like, anyone who was born in the 2000s, or even, I don't even know, we have anyone from, like, the 2010s watching this, there was no indie coverage in the 90s. Like,
No.
Absolutely, positively, absolutely zero. And part of this was, again, due to the kind of stranglehold that Nintendo and Sega had on the market. Anyone who remembers the quote-unquote good old days, where Nintendo basically restricted what companies got access to cartridges. So if you didn't abide by Nintendo's rules, guess what? You weren't allowed to be on a Nintendo system.
Yeah, that was some stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then they pretty much like did their own like Nintendo Power propaganda style magazine about their games. And I mean, it's not like you really had a they were, they're top quality, top notch, but still they had to push their own agenda, right? They wouldn't let it covered in Game Pro or any of the other ones. It had to have their slant on it. So yeah, they're really good at that PR stuff.
We should really start a Josh Pro magazine. All the news about magazine. All the Joshes.
Yes, that's right. Josh Pro Mag.
And, like, at most, what we got in terms of indie were the studios who could just basically shout out loud enough. And this was exclusively to the PC. I would say probably, like, my first actual exposure to an indie dev would probably be Crow Team, when they got big in the 90s, thanks to Serious Sam. Yeah. And that was pretty much like the first real solid case. We could maybe, it's kind of hard to tell like time-wise, but maybe like Introversion, with the likes of Darwinia, Uplink. This was, again, long before Prison Architect. And again, like, people viewed indie games as this kind of, almost like an oddity. Hey, are you tired of playing this big budget game from Nintendo or Sega? Check out this game from just two people who they made in a garage somewhere over 2 months.
That sounded like an anti-pitch for a game.
And a lot of the indie games we the early elements of indie games would come from the likes of Flash, Shockwave, what was it? Armor Games. Oh, what was the other one? I think there was a third one. There was another website that did a lot in terms of indie games, or just letting you post a lot of stuff. Newgrounds, of course, did Alien Hominid. And again, like, it really was shown as, yeah, they look at these little games from these other people, but here's a 4-page spread of Half-Life 2, or here's a
Mm.
coverage on 27 Madden games. And of course, when the explosion of Call of Duty happened in the early 2000s. And as we've said before, like, indie game coverage really didn't actually like exist until like 2008, 2009 with the Xbox Summer of Games. That's when we got,
Yeah.
again, Braid. What was it? Braid, Fez. I think there was one more game. I can't
Me
remember.
boy.
Oh yeah, of course, Meat Boy.
Me boy.
And of course, that was
Yeah.
covered in Indie Game the Movie and all that. But that was kind of like, and we went a little bit further back. There was, of course, Cave Story. And
Yeah.
Cave Story, I think, is a phenomenal game. It's probably the game I like to contribute as like the first real kind of indie dev proving they could handle or they could walk with the big boys
Yeah.
kind of situation.
Definitely. That game has a very special place in my heart. When I had more free time, I would try and at least like get one playthrough of it like each year, like because of how much respect I have for like that game literally oozes passion and quality and polish and at so many different levels, right? And so yeah, that was definitely I think like one of the best examples of what you're like, wow, okay, you can actually have a solo dev like go toe to toe with a triple A game of this style, right? And so it was definitely an awakening, right? And then again with the Xbox Summer, but it was only like just 4 games. I think they started pushing some more stuff. I think later on, like Mark of the Ninja and some other ones I'm trying to remember. But yeah, that's really when the push started happening. But even then, like the coverage was still so limited, right? It was only like what they decided to show you. And I'm not sure how the approval to get into the Xbox ecosystem was at that time. If you required a large amount of money, or if you required a good side publisher or something like that, or luck, I'm not sure.
And that kind of statement, I think, kind of has pervaded indie coverage pretty much up until today in terms of which games get mentioned, which ones get noticed. And it's a very tough market for indie devs. And it's something that I've said before that a lot of people assume that when IGN or Markiplier or Northernlion or pick any major outlet covers an indie game, that's the sign that they've succeeded. But it's the reverse. They've succeeded, and now IGN and Markiplier and so on will cover them. And for a lot of indie developers out there, even the actual term indie can mean, again, like vastly different things. There are some studios where indie means this is a studio made up of 10 people who worked on every single Mario game, and they have like combined 80 years of experience, and they have backings from investors to make their, Call of Duty style game. Or indie means 2 people just out of college who have just loaded up Unity for the first time, and they're trying to make something in the next 2 to 3 years.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, also like we're getting. Well, I forgot the term that was coined. But anyway, it's like, is a game that's being pushed by Devolver, like, is that an indie in any way? Like, even if it is a small team, is it indie when you have that much of a budget? I think like we're gonna have to have some reshuffling or re-understanding about what true indie means, or just maybe some more niche definitions for it.
And that kind of brings us back to the whole IGN issue that the indie games IGN will cover, are they necessarily considered indie?
Yeah.
If they're covering, again, a game that's being published by Ubisoft, or again, anything from Devolver these days, and again, like Devolver is still very much like on the independent side, but again, this was a question that has been kind of popping up here and there for the last 13 years. Do you grow out of being an indie developer at some point? And it's a valid question because I know I'm in another Discord for indie devs, and a lot of the people in there are like very small time. Like these are like maybe 1 to 5 person teams working on a game. And when you look on Steam and you search, indie can mean, someone with backings from like 5 major angel investors who they've gotten like. Is there even like a developer budget point when you're no longer indie? Like if your game just sold, 1.5 million copies, can you still be called an indie dev?
Right. Yeah. I think there definitely just has to be some limits, and like where you're no longer indie because it has to represent something, right? And I feel like right now it's like it's in such a positive light that it's almost being abused, right? That like indie this, indie that. This is an indie game by this team, and we're really trying to push because of the AAA malaise that's happening, right? So like everybody's looking for something different, and if you can offer someone maybe a pseudo fake wrapped AAA, but yet indie experience into the ecosystem, right? And just feed that to people as a different experience, because that's what people are yearning for, really. Like, I mean, I don't think people are looking to play many of the current AAA things that are out there to offer. I'm looking at Devolver Digital's stock price right now, and it's $25 versus Nintendo's stock price of $10. So that's if that tells you something, Devolver Digital has some money to mess around with. I don't know. I haven't paid attention to what they're trading with or not, but that means they have plenty of money. So how could if Devolver said, okay, hey, we want to work with you on Rooster Rampage, am I still an indie now that I have like, I don't know, buku of like marketing money now to work with, right? That most indies don't have a pittance of that, right?
And I'm looking on Steam right now under the indie tag, and you have games on here like Project Zomboid, which has been in development for like ages now. Then you have something like Stray. And you remember, like, all the kind of hubbub around Stray, and how, oh, look at the cute cat, and it's from this unknown developer who also has several $100,000 and investors helping them make this game.
Yeah.
And there is definitely something to be said about graphics. Like, we've seen from a lot of, like, quote-unquote indie developers, and even some of the other ones, that these games, they look like almost like a AA style game. They use, Unreal Engine. They look like another Call of Duty or very super realistic military shooter. And it creates this expectation that there are people who still, I think, view indie game, that a worthy indie game has to look like it came from a Nintendo, or look like some off-brand Ubisoft or EA game. And if it doesn't look like that, then it's not worth that time. And let's see, what else is on Steam? There's also another adult game who I will not name because I'm pretty sure YouTube will nuke the stream if I mention some of the adult games that are showing up under the indie label these days.
Oh yeah.
Be a monetary limit. But I think to Rat's comment, the problem isn't by fault of the developer. Like, if you release a game, and let's say you have that lucky experience that this game sold 700,000 copies. Let's say you do have that kind of breakout Five Nights at Freddy's, that Vampire Survivor success. Like, again, we've said this before, like, how do you follow that up? Can you follow that up?
Yeah, and then also, like you were saying, previous to the success, the game was made As far as I know, with $2,000 of a budget, like that is slim pickings.
Hmm.
And so, like that, it was full on indie, like hardcore full on indie. I didn't, and then, so he did it solo, full on indie, purchased what he could. And so that would still be considered indie. But after it became successful, is it still indie now? Right? Is it now like, I mean, I saw the recent expansion. I'm like, dang, the marketing and the promo they had, I was like, wow, there's just buku bucks flying around this game now. Like there's no struggle happening here for this game.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think, part of this issue, that to some, an indie, when a game is indie, it is a, shot in the dark whether or not it's going to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
for sure.
there are studios out there where it's not a shot in the dark. Again, whatever Kid Fox makes, Clay Entertainment, let's see, Frictional with Amnesia, and Vampire Survivor being a major example, they are automatically kind of like up 15 in the success rate compared to other developers. They have a plus 15, 20 roll on their dice.
Yeah.
And it's that question of, can they still be considered indie? And again, the problem is that developers are very horrible when it comes to setting established labels for things, as we've seen with Metroidvanias, as we've seen with roguelikes and roguelites. And again, do we need to have a new term, like for maybe like starting out indie versus an established one?
Definitely. I have no idea what kind of terminal, like I don't know, like indie, and or like, would it be like indie and then you have double A indie and triple A indie, something similar like that? Like I don't know if that's needed, because like, if your game is published by Devolver, you're clearly a triple A, and even if your team is indie, right? Maybe if your team is small, you still got buku bucks, right, to mess with. And any team that has money, that knows how to spend it properly, can utilize that properly to get a excellent product delivered if you
Mm-hmm.
have the correct vision, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm. And part again of this is that challenge of getting your game in front of people. And like I said, I did that talk with a investment firm last year, and we were discussing how, a lot of people who have money, I mean like serious money, they are not going to look at some weird project from a group of 4 students who put together a prototype in their spare time. They want some. It's that kind of that chicken and egg scenario of, we want to get money to someone who's experimental, but we also want to make sure they're completely established and they have a proven track record of, you know, 15, 20 years of development experience in the game industry.
yeah, definitely the chicken and the egg for that, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have published so many titles and this and that, but how do you get things done, or get so many things done without the funding, right? So how do you
Mm-hmm.
get there without that happening? So to get established, it takes money to make money, unfortunately. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, definitely, like thinking about, I think what Bratstell said, if you have a publisher, you're probably not indie, right? That would be true. I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, because it
Mm-hmm.
depends on the publisher,
Yeah.
because the publisher you got might be one of the most bare bones publisher that you can find, and they have one or two connects themselves, and so, compared to, a no name publisher compared to Devolver, right? Does that change your does that make you right? So,
Yeah.
and I mean, and then of course also, even with the monetary, right? Like you can, again, I'm not saying like you could give any team a certain amount of money, and they might not end up with the same product even close. Like one might appear like, wow, they had a much larger budget, and the other one would appear like, wow, they had no money at all. That was it depends clearly how each team allocates it, right? So
And
the vagueness is just unreal when it really comes down to it.
And don't forget again about the graphical fidelity of a game. There are
Right.
people who they will say that if your game has pixel art, I will not play it. Doesn't matter what the quality of the game is. It doesn't matter if you spend 6 months, 5 years, 10 years of your life making it. The second they see pixel art, they assume it's some garbage tier game from some no-name person.
Yeah.
And if you remember last year, there was this indie game from this developer who made this like first person shooter slash melee game. It was like super Unreal Engine 4, like very high level graphical stuff. It got picked up by a publisher as well. And like people were like oohing and eyeing over it. And a lot of people who are in the know playing, they're like, yeah, it's okay. Like, yes, it's a first person shooter, but, shiny wrapper notwithstanding, it didn't do anything that we really haven't already seen before. And there are still a lot of people out there who view graphics, specifically graphical horsepower, we're not even talking about, having a unique visual style,
Yeah.
as, you know, the metric for what a game or how great a game is.
Or whether it tips over from indie to double A to triple A, right? Like that's the only metric. Like that's their 1A metric, right? Um Another side note, Vince is mentioning about team size, right? Because that's super critical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, if you have a small team, regardless if it's a small team working on the game, it's going to be a small team. Even if they have a huge amount of money, or a large or their budget is large and it's still a small team, you either decide to b hire more people, c contract more people, or keep the team the same size and allocate those assets to other things such as marketing or game assets or things like that, right? So it depends.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, I think maybe the first metric you'd want to look at if it's is indie, and this is the thing that I look at when I'm looking at a studio. When I was amazed at Supergiant, like when you see the people that have been there for so long, they show their team and it's just a core team. And so I would assume that the first metric you need to analyze, is it indie or not, is yes, the team size, because that is the biggest effect on what you're able to produce. Uh, what a one person team can produce versus a two-person team can produce is not
Mm-hmm.
nearly just like a 50% increase. You could be talking a 75% increase or a 120% increase, depending on how the team gels, right? Three people
Mm-hmm.
could speed it up and or slow it down. But yeah, definitely that's the metric. And I think you'd want to go next onto do they have a publisher, right? And then third would be like funding, I would think,
Mm-hmm.
is how we could start devising um what area of indie you truly are, and also that would help address the issues of that. A lot of people are really throwing around the indie term, almost like as a Dark Souls term or a Metroidvania
Mm-hmm.
term, to try and help sell their game, right?
Yep.
Because before, previously, if it was indie, it was all hands off, no one wants to play it, only the weirdos. And now indie games, everyone wants to know. Again, they're interested in a new experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
And again, there are studios out there who call themselves indie, but when they say indie, it's really like 20 people who've all worked at like Riot, Nintendo, Ubisoft. They have like a combined
yeah,
like 60 years of experience making games. They have investors who, they work with or they know from their time of the AAA studio, and they're just trying to recreate that same game, or they're trying to make their own take off of a Call of Duty or a No Man's Sky. And I sometimes you can't even like throw a stone without hitting a indie first-person shooter that looks almost exactly like Call of Duty using Unreal Engine 5. And again, like, I've seen this a lot, that a lot of the least successful indie games have often come from AAA developers going into the space thinking that they can just do the same thing they did at an Activision, at a Nintendo, or an EA, and the game just kind of lacks. Like, there are people who, again, like, shiny graphics me, I'm going to buy it. But for a lot of these games, they just don't really, they lack that kind of soul. And I know we were talking about this on the Discord last week, about the difference between being like a cook and a chef. And, being able to follow a recipe versus being able to actually understand that process. And it's why, again, that a lot of the best indie games we've played over the past like 10 to 13 years have come from people who don't have 20 plus years in the industry, who didn't work on a Mario. I mean, how many fantastic platforms have we played from developers who have never stepped inside Nintendo?
Right. Same thing for like JRPGs. You would have
Mm-hmm.
like X's from Square Enix or X's from any of the other famous RPG studios, and they went off to create their own RPGs. Were they amazing or famous? Probably not. They missed it. And like we've discussed this before, when you traverse the AAA game development like world is completely different from a true indie world, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
true indie game development is like truly small teams, big creative, small ships, agile, not really stuck into like the rigmarole of a giant AAA or even AA studio, right? Like we can pivot, we can move, we can experiment and do all kind of things. What you cannot do, and those are things that you cannot do in AAA, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're not daily in AAA like coming up with cool ideas or this or that. No, 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 no. You're figuring out how to optimize that texture or how to
Mm-hmm.
optimize that grass, or you're trying to figure out like how we can cross market this game on the platform, or optimizations or thing. You're not, the majority of the focus is again like they're usually sequelizing something that's already there, right? Because they're not taking any chances to begin with, right? Most games that you see that they do take chances and they go in the AAA era, they fail terribly, and there's many reasons for that. Just like they're not getting it also again in the indie space, and one of those reasons is that the AAA space is way more how we talk about like the cogwheel, the grinding, the Ford factory type of game development, right? Which is like forcing huge amounts of capitalism and hoping that you're going to get out
Mm-hmm.
more money from the same game, same thing, right? Same results, right? And indie, that's not really the case. We're really creating nothing from something, right? Like hopefully you have some funding, hopefully you have some marketing, you have your background, but when you have people that have spent 20, 30 years working at AAA, that's not indie at all. Once you head over to indie, you're suddenly assigned 5, 6 different hats. You no longer have your HR monitor, your HR, your PR, your you no longer have your marketing. You don't have your artists. You don't have like you're missing a lot of people, managers and different levels depending on the bureaucracy of the studio that you worked at, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
instead you have to create that culture from scratch when you're usually there. So like working in an indie studio is completely different. Not only do you have to create the culture, you have to figure out what kind of workflow you guys are going to work with. Are we going to use Unreal Engine 5 and just do a shooter again? Like you have to decide so many things. So many decisions that are already made for you. You have to make those decisions now. And each one of those decisions is very important, as any indie developer will attribute and tell you. And so it's kind of like you're having someone that is being told pretty much everything that they need to do. This is the vision of the game. There's very few people that are working on a AAA game that, unless they're the directors, right? But there's very few of them, and they're usually staying in the same place. So they're usually lower down the rank. And so these guys have been, like you said, 20 years. But what has that taught them, right?
Mhm.
What have they learned? Because really, truly, you learn in game development from failure. We talk about fail fast, fail often, because failure is the teacher. Success is not the teacher. And if you were working
Mhm.
on a relatively successful company, the seas are not very bumpy. There's not a lot of things that you have to navigate. You don't really have to pivot at all or change things around because those things are changed for you and decided for you. All of a sudden, when you're put in the driver's seat, things just don't work, right?
Yep. And again, like, how many people who work on a AAA game actively think about onboarding? Who think
Right.
about UI UX? Unless you were actually specifically hired for that role. If
Right.
your director tells you make this UI, this, and this, you're probably not thinking, well, what if these icons don't look right? No, you're going to make this, and this. But then if you try that exact same strategy as an indie dev, and all this time you've been making a horribly confusing UI, guess what? Your game is dead. Because no one wants to play a game with a horribly confusing UI.
Yeah.
And as an interesting point, like I was looking up, so here's a question. We've been again talking about that kind of metric of what indie dev is. When we see stuff like, like the PC Gamer or PC Game Showcase, Day of the Devs 2023 was I think yesterday.
Yesterday.
Games that make it into that, like these are the ones, of course, like IGN, Kotaku, Destructoid, all the major YouTuber streamers are on cover. Would they be considered indie? Like, if you get invited to, like, a major, or even, like, quote-unquote, like, major trade event or trade show, are you still considered that small-time person? Now, of course, like, if you go, like, if you... I know indie developers who, of course, spend their own money and they get a booth at a PAX, or Too Many Games, or whatever. That would be a different story. I'm talking about, like, these, like, major marketing events, and you get invited to show your game off, or you're able to get into them.
Yeah, I was when I saw that and I was seeing the event from yesterday and I was like really unknown games that you've never heard of and I'm like I just
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel I felt like every game that was on there was no longer in that realm of being like indie anymore, right? And I was kind of just like back and forth thinking about it and it's like are they indie or are they not now like at this point because that is such a massive push, right? And like eventually we're going to get to like is that push worth it, right? Is getting on IGN worth it for your game, right? But yeah, like I really couldn't parse out once you get onto that big of a platform. Are you indie or not, Josh? Where do you stand on that? Or chat, where do you stand on that?
Yeah. And Smith brought up Undertale, so I'm going to open up a huge hornet
Okay.
sense with this question.
Yeah.
Is Toby Fox still considered an indie dev? Because
Yeah.
on one hand, he still works very small. On the other hand, his game is featured in Smash Brothers, and he had a chance to sit down and play with Sakurai.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. Like you've you've exceeded the confines of indie, right? I think indie in itself has the whole idea about indie is that you're confined in some way through budget,
Mm-hmm.
through I don't know the hardware that you're using. That's you're literally is it stands for independent, right? Isn't that what we meant by indie or did it change into something? I don't know, but I mean you're confined in some way and all of a sudden when you're there and you're playing with Sakura and like you're just what I don't know when you're on that level, I don't think you can be considered indie anymore, right?
Yeah, again, it's that I think what you just said is very important. It's what is your limitation? For a
Yeah.
lot of developers, again, Jeff Vogt, his limitation is that he focuses specifically on CRPGs of the 90s. That is his market. That is his niche. Is his game ever going to be featured on IGN? I honestly doubt that. I would be surprised and shocked if one of his games gets a full-on, video review on an IGN site. And this was one of the things that I remember I was speaking with yet another Josh about this. We were talking about kind of like how there's a difference between a video game site versus a site that wants to like cover the industry. That if you're going to a game site, they're not going to want to cover something that's not already interesting. We have seen this with Polygon, with IGN, Destructoid, Kotaku, and so on. That if the game isn't already a success, they're not going to make it. And this will certainly be the time. We'd love to have Tomo and Seth on for this point about a lot of people view like game journalism these days as the quote unquote kingmaker. That again, if your game is covered by these sites, that's the sign that you are in. You are the hot thing. But again, it's not really the case anymore. That I know people will like to say that working at IGN or Kotaku is such a big deal, but I honestly don't see it as being this huge mark of honor. It's a mark of honor for game journalists talking to game journalists. But in terms of like the impact on the industry, I feel like that side of things, as we were saying earlier with magazines, it feels like that is becoming less and less important, or less and less impactful these days.
Yeah, like you're saying, like I think it's more akin to an echo chamber between journalists now, right? And the impact that it had is much more softened, right? And then I feel like they're always playing catch up, right? So like maybe they might cover an indie or whatever, but like they're really only covering what they feel is going to, like, of course, because of capitalism, what is going to get the clicks and the metrics, right? And they don't feel like, so again, it's creating a chicken and the egg, right? They easily could like cover like all the indie games like that are coming out, right? And then somehow, some way, the cream would flow to the top, right? Hopefully, as we speak, right? But like, it's like if they don't cover it, it doesn't exist, right? And that just, that's not, like, they're supposed to be. Are they still? Also, side note, are they still the kingmakers, Josh? No, they're not.
Definitely not anymore. And again, I think, as we've said, like IGN is now considered by a lot of people like, I guess, like National Enquirer. They're not really considered like having your game mentioned on IGN is not as big of a badge of honor. And conversely, it's the same thing with Steam these days. Like, being on Steam is not considered, oh my god, you are fantastic for being on Steam. That's just the default. Like, if your game's not on Steam, then people are wondering what the heck is wrong with you. But as we've said, if you think being on Steam is going to magically sell your game, again, the harsh truth is the requirement to get on Steam right now is what, $100, $150? Yep,
$100. Yeah,
it's not, the barrier of entry is now a pay toll, and when it's a pay toll, it means that it's not special. And again, it's why it becomes that much harder to get your game noticed. And as, again, one of the major things about how the industry has changed, 13 years ago, if your game was on Steam, it was 100% guaranteed to be a success. It didn't matter what that game was. Because, again, how many games were on Steam in 2010 compared to 2020?
Right.
And
2023 though, right, Josh?
Yeah. Yeah, whatever year this is, I don't know anymore. But we'll just, I know, I'll put like a random number for indie coverage, random year.
Yeah, random
indie
year.
Coverage 4782 right now.
It'll be the same.
Horse Armor is now $8,000 for each thing.
We'll just have to adjust some stats, otherwise it'll be the same.
And I want to go back to what you said a minute ago about if the game is not covered, does it exist? Because that is definitely like, this is how you can tell the difference between someone who only plays AAA games versus someone who covers a lot of games. When they go on Twitter to complain, where are all the good games? There are
Yeah.
people who said no good games were released in 2023. We didn't play any games. Where's all my Call of Duties and all my Fortnites? And as a interesting point, I'm going to pull up. I've now had to go to a spreadsheet to keep track of all the games I've actually played and covered. I have played 71 games this year so far, actually released games. I'm not counting demos here.
Yeah.
So, where all the games go? I don't know.
Yeah, and like I think a week or two ago when the IGN thing dropped, and so I just hopped into one of the IGN things, and yeah, that's what they were parodying. They were literally like, yeah, there's just like big problems in the industry, like no games have been released at all. I'm like, we haven't played any good games at all, and I'm like, what? If you're merely only focusing, right, like if you're talking like, okay, you'd be right if you were saying there are no good triple A games that have been released, right? Or no
Mm-hmm.
good double A games. But to say that, there's no good indie games, I've literally played one of the best shooters that I've played in I don't know how long this year. Was it this year when it came out? Well, when did Dust came out?
Dust came out, I think 2020. No, I think it was 2018. I think we did.
20,
I think we answered this on the shooter thing.
well, Ultra Kill also, you know what I mean? Ultra Kill came out. But Dusk, yeah. So
2018 was Dust.
2018, right? I mean, but still, they literally, I was just amazed by the way that they're covering it. So, like, the only thing that literally exists to them is triple A. So then, on that side note, tangent, why would we be like courting IGN or wanting them to cover us in any way, form, or fashion when I think they'd probably do more harm to your game if you're set aside next to all the other boring AAA games?
Mm-hmm. And to Vincent's comment, yep, 71 is rookie. I will say this: no one is allowed to call themselves a gamer unless they can play at least 500 games a year. You need to have at
Right,
least 500, and then you can be called a gamer.
right.
I'm throwing the gauntlet down right now.
Yeah, IGN's already 90% AI written articles, also probably.
And to this kind of issue when it comes to coverage, again, like there's this discussion about how a lot of people view video games and game journalism as kind of like being like a Hollywood star that it's going to be your make or break or whatever. And when we look at like there's this kind of dichotomy between what does it mean to be a gamer or a streamer or an influencer versus being someone who understands what game dev and game design is. And that's one of our talks we have to go to for a roundtable at some point. And it feels like there's like two different worlds going on here. And I feel like indie developers are kind of caught in the middle there.
Yeah,
That,
definitely.
it's great, like, to some indie developer, getting 100 copies of your game sold is this fantastic thing. For someone else, they want their game to be kind of blown up so that, insert celebrity is rapping about it, and there's a movie tie-in to their game, and it's being featured by every major celebrity who's talking about this game. And it's just like a very weird like area to exist in.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, and like we were talking about, like the triple down. We were talking about the apology for Gollum, right? We were talking about triple down behavior, for indies, right? That we needed to like follow that the way that AAA acts, and I really think that's the opposite, right? Like, I don't think we should be courting the same type of coverage, right? That like, why would we want to be going into the same ocean that AAA is in, or the same ocean that AA is in, right? Like, literally, instead, we should be doing better research and see where like the people that are interested in indies are hanging out. Like people like you, Josh, that are like playing good games that are coming out this year and could 100% verify that good games. All the people in the chat that like that are playing indie games that have coming out, and most of them are gonna have agree with the same thing about the AAA malaise, which has been going on for so long, and we all can feel it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the standardization of the games, and nothing is ever takes a chance or diverts or is updated or is different due to like the way that they have to succumb to their stakeholders, etc., stuff like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
like it's like, where exactly does an indie game want to go for coverage, right? And it's clearly not the same areas for a double A or a triple A, wouldn't you say, Josh?
Mm-hmm. And again, there are people who will say that it's not a video game unless IGN covers it. That it's not worth my time unless it's already been validated in some other way. And it is that kind of weird issue. Like, we've seen, like, I brought, like, the chicken and egg analogy earlier, but it's very much that case when we look at kind of the rise of influencer culture. That there are people who will cover games only again if it's already been mentioned by IGN. If it's already been covered, here, there, and everywhere. And the chance of them stumbling across, like, I don't know, let's see, let me go to my indie list right here. Let's see, the chance of them stumbling across, like, something like H-Rot, or Tiny Thor, or Warriors of the Nile 2 is practically zero.
Right.
Because they're not going to touch those games until everyone else has already covered them. And here's, again, like, the very sad truth. It's business. And I've been told this before. Why should someone spend $500 on getting a copy of an article on, I don't know, pick any random indie game versus invest that money into what's the hottest vampire survivor like? What is the latest deck builder, which was, of course, the big thing? What's the hottest Souls like? Because that stuff drives money, it drives engagement, and that's what people want at that level.
Indeed.
Yep, to Pony's comment, they go safe. And
Yeah.
again, it's that situation where I've gave this story plenty of times that there's an indie game that I've played that within 6 to 8 months, then I see this piece on Polygon or this piece on IGN talking about, oh my god, I just happened to discover this amazing indie game that, of course, has already been blowing up for the last 6 to 7 months.
Yeah, those are my favorite Kotaku articles. They're like, I just played the most amazing indie game, and I'm like, really? You just happen to pick one up? Yeah, indeed.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's that situation. Like, I was thinking about Celeste, and how Celeste took home, I think it was the game of the year for, or one of the highest marks. I think that was like 2019, maybe
Yes.
2020, like that.
Yeah.
And how many people have actually covered anything else that the developer did since then? Not really. I think they were also responsible for a Kaizo mod, which was like really crazy for Super Mario World. Allegedly, we can't say for 100% for
Really?
sure. But again, it's that case of, what have you done for me lately?
Right.
Yes, you were this hot indie dev in 2015, but it's been 6 months since your game made 1 million copies, so who cares about you now?
I ran across. Do you remember the game Baba Is You?
Yep.
Yeah, and so that one IGN was covering it, flipping. Oh, we just discovered this Baba Is You. It's amazing. You gotta check it out. So it's blowing up, and then I just happened to be on Itch, right? And then all of a sudden I see that he released a new game, and he actually released like two more after that. Literally never heard of them. They weren't covered on I you know what I mean? They weren't covered in any of the bigger outlets. And so it's like, yeah, what have you done for me lately? And they're like quickly forgotten.
And if
Uh
you want perhaps like the most salient example of this, If you remember the game To the Moon that was released in 2011, this was one of like the first like really early kind of like breakout indie hits as well. This incredibly emotionally charged game everyone couldn't stop talking about. Well, here's the fun thing. They just released a new game in 2021, and I don't think it got anywhere near the coverage. It is sitting at, I think, looks like over 8,000 reviews now. But I can tell you when that game was released, no one was talking about it. I don't think I saw any coverage from any YouTubers. I don't even know if IGN actually got around to covering it. Let me see if I can find that really fast here. They have a preview, but yeah, I am not seeing a review from IGN on that game.
Yeah. Let's see.
And if a studio like that had one of the most like award-winning games over a decade ago couldn't get their game mentioned by IGN,
right?
Again, the question then falls to what's the chance of an indie developer? And I can guarantee you, with any amount of money, that I bet IGN gets constant emails from new developers saying, "Hey, can you cover my game? Hey, I released this. Can you cover it? Can you cover it?" And I bet a lot of them just end up in the trash.
Yeah, indeed. I would never contact them for that same reason, but yeah, I bet you that's the cycle. Rats tell you follow Baba, the creator for Baba. Baba is you. Yeah.
And again, with this idea of how much influencer culture has really grown and changed what people cover in games, in a way, it's made things, I think, a little bit better. Oh, to the moon guy.
Oh, yeah.
That there are, and this is, I think, another major point. As an indie developer, you need to understand not just the market of your game, but who are the loudspeakers of that game.
Yeah, very.
And as a very weird point, I've become the Zachtronics loudspeaker because I keep getting emails from developers saying, "Hey, I saw you cover this Zachtronics game. You'll like this programming puzzle game that's all about learning algorithmic chemistry. You can figure that out."
It would be a game dev in no time, Josh.
Again, if I can finish a Zachtronics game, I think I can get a job as an engineer at that point.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Like what you just said is worded it perfectly. Like, who is the loudest speaker that you can get for you, right? And like, while IGN is a very loud speaker, I don't even know how much to respect it anymore, right? Like, how much does anybody care about a Kotaku article anymore, right? Like, I see negative things about Kotaku articles or IGN articles, or nothing really mentioned. Most people don't really trust them, care for them anyway. And it's so like your loudest speakers, like, do your research and find which, on social media, who's there, like, promoting your type of games. Just like you said, you're the Zachtronics guy currently, right? Like, find out who's the guy for your game and find out who's the woman for your game, the person, and like they can, and that way they can be the speaker for you also, right? And we have to look to different avenues, and as you said, it's constantly shifting and moving, right? Like Twitter was like the thing, I don't know, just a bit ago, and now we're not sure like if it's going to sinking. Some of us are still staying with it, but like, what's going to be the next method that we need to use, and we have to be ready to shift and adapt and pivot as quickly as possible.
And for any developers watching this, I'm also the VS-like guy, the deck-building roguelike guy, the action roguelike guy, and the platformer guy.
So again, guy too.
Get those games out there. And it is that challenge, because even people who cover these games, they sometimes get tired of them. And it becomes even harder than get their interest. Again, there was that period where everyone stopped caring about deck builders. And, major names are like, I don't ever want to play another deck builder again. Well, if you're a developer who just spent the last 2 years working on this innovative Yep, exactly, Vincent. I'm the pizza guy as well.
And the pizza guy.
On that innovative deck builder, what happened to your game then? And we have that other topic about why some games succeed and some games don't. In the span of time between Slay the Spire being released and Monster Train coming out, Monster Train, I would say, is pound for pound the better deck builder. It did not do anywhere near the sales numbers. And part of that is from people being sick and tired of deck builders. Just as I'm sure people are, probably sick and tired of VS Lakes right now. Just as they got sick and tired of Battle Royales. And they got sick and tired of FNAF clones, and so on. Because no one tried to copy FNAF over the last 13 years, right?
Oh my gosh, never. That game, one of the key good like elements is like that it was the only one that did it. So if you wanted to play a FNAF game, you could play the OG original. That was one of the best things about it for me, because otherwise, if there was clones of that game like other ones, Josh, I don't think I'd be able to survive.
Yep. And again, like, here's like the scary part. Even like legitimately great games are being buried. Again, look at the Boomer Shooter. How many, as we said during our shooter talk, how many experimental or just really high quality Boomer Shooters or new kinds of shooters were released over the last 4 years? And even they're starting to feel that fatigue. Again, I spoke with Dave Oshry and David Zeminski about this.
Mm.
And yeah, like, it is getting harder and harder just for a great game to stand out. Let alone, again, a game from just like 2 to 3 people. I've received games from like students who are just I'm sure they just like shot their email out into the wild. They probably, BCC several hundred people on YouTube. And I don't know if I was literally the only person who responded to them. In fact, I want to see something really fast, if I can find this. Because a student team did just that. They sent me a game, like, this was like 2 years ago, and I can't find the name of it. I want to look up on YouTube if I'm like literally the only YouTuber who covered it. Oh yeah, and
you have a way to find out.
And yeah, PonyCon, yeah, now indie developers are revoking keys. Even if I cover the game, like, keys have gotten revoked.
How many times has that happened to you so far? Like, I swear every week you've had a key revoked after you reviewed it or you played it.
Yeah, I think at least like 5 got revoked this year so far.
That's wild. Wow, that's quite an effort to do that.
Yeah, and as another pro tip to an indie developer, do not ever revoke the key of someone who's covering a game, because they will never. That is kind of like blacklist territory.
Yeah, you blacklist, you burn the bridge, kind of burn the bridge. So don't do that. Real weird, strange behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know why you'd want. Okay, Josh, why would someone want to revoke the key? Maybe we can walk away through this.
Maybe they felt that the game wasn't being covered, or that the game was covered and now they don't need the key anymore. And here's another point. If you want your game to be covered, do not issue stipulations or conditions to that. You, as an indie developer, or even if you have a publisher, outside of saying an embargo, unless you are actually spending money on it, you cannot say anything. If a YouTuber wants to cover your game the day they get that key, or 2-3 months down the line, it's their prerogative. And
Josh, since you cover games, I mean, what's the best email you get? Is like when they ask you to cover the game, has a key in it, nothing on there. Which ones get your attention the quickest?
Well, it needs to have a key, or at least say, we're going to really do it. But you also need to have a store page. You need to have, again, like, the days, here's another big point. Do not send someone a file. Do not send just like a random exe file or a zip file and say, can you cover my game?
You still get that?
Yes, I do. One, it's not really considered professional, and two, it's also very high security risk these days. You need at minimum an itch or a Steam page. You
Yeah.
need a landing page for your game.
If you don't have money and you need to get your game out, put it on itch, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
just put it on itch, and then once you get to it, like you've practiced putting the store page together and you're ready for Steam and you got all your ducks in a row, then put it on Steam. But there's no reason not to have it. You shouldn't be sending out executables. No one has time to download it. I can't believe they're still doing that. That's wild. No one has time to download it. No one's going to download it. Massive security risk, and it's just doesn't work that way, right? So it's really good. Also, like the security ways you have with itch, just itch alone, right? With keys you can generate, you can patch them very quickly. So like for example, if I set you an ex, like I sent you an exe, Josh, and then like 2 days later I updated it and I'm like, oh, he has the old exe. Am I gonna send you another exe, or I could have just patched the itch version, right, and just update it and be like, hey Josh, it's updated, so whatever was going on, if you want to give it another whirl, that I fixed that massive bug. So right on, okay, cool. Like there's just so many benefits to having a page up, right? And that it's just, and you gotta have it. So
And to another point about like reaching out to like knowing who the person is, make sure you get someone who also is not going to attack your game.
yeah,
Like there are a lot of people who cover games just to, insult them as much as they can. And like we've said, we've kind of gone past that period where, any publicity is considered good publicity. And
yeah, and it's just not that way. We don't bad publicity of your game can stick around forever, and like you may think that like like where we live currently, like 24 news cycle, everything moves so fast that people will forget, but kind of not really. People are always going to remember like the first impression of your game, and it kind of just sticks. So be very wary of that.
Yep. And you also need to be aware that there's a difference between someone who covers a game to cover a game and someone who's covering a game for just content.
Right.
And that is one of the biggest traps you can fall into if you're trying to spend money on marketing. Just having someone big and famous play your game doesn't mean anything if they're not actively showing off what makes your game work. If they're just using it as background footage for like a wacky skit, or if it's literally just like background footage while they're going on some weird rant or topic, that's not selling your game. Just because eyes are on your game doesn't mean that gets translated into sales. And there's a lot more to that whole idea of the conversion. And that is something, again, like we need to like get someone who actually does like publishing and marketing to kind of come on and talk about that point.
Yeah, I thought I pinged Seth and Tomo just before the show to see if we could get him on. Never knew, but yeah, trying to get Seth on would definitely help that area.
Yep. And it is it's getting, of course, exceedingly tough to have someone cover your game. Like I've said, like I will cover just about any game that gets sent to me. If you send me a key, as long as it's not something that's like, M-rated or NC-17, I will cover it. But again, it's that situation that I am certainly not the norm. And again, not being the norm means that my reach is limited. Like we said, like I should have sold out by now. Now that I hit 10,000, I should be making all attack videos on any game you get that you send me. I'm gonna make a this game proves this genre is dead.
There you go. Man, you will get so many views if you did that, like instantly.
See, I could go to the dark side so easily.
Yeah, they have all the information, man. You just get the algo. But yeah. So let's see here. else we have to cover?
We are. See, it is about. We're a little over an hour in. I'm
Okay.
trying to think if there's any other big points that I want to mention. Anything on your notes?
No, I think we've gone actually like danced around everything on my notes so far, so I'm pretty good.
So I guess with that said, for like kind of like my final point, as an indie developer, you need to really be mindful as to not only again who's covering your game, but how they're covering it. The market itself for game coverage, I think for a lot of people they view it as being just this kind of everyone's been bought already kind of market. And why a lot of people tend to focus on their favorite influencers, their very specific niche sites. And the time in which we could say that a major site is, the surefire guarantee for success, it's gone the same way as just saying being on Steam is the surefire way of being on success or being to success. Today, you have to do the work yourself. You need to figure out why someone should play your game, and you need to show someone that element. Again, we talked again about how important having a good GIF is of your game, of being able to show this, amazing 3 to 10 second clip of your game, and that could go viral. As a good example, the game that I'm really looking forward to, My Friendly Neighborhood, which looks like a survival horror meets Sesame Street. The whole
Wow.
reason that game blew up was because they showed a GIF of, hey, look, this puppet's coming at you. You shoot him with a shotgun, the guy gets like flung like 80 feet away. Or that they accidentally made a bug that caused a character to multiply. So you shoot him, and then he spawns like 57 copies of him. And that got so popular that they decided to put that into the game as a feature. But again, it's how this marketing works. You remember that game Choo Choo Charlie that
Yeah.
came out last year? It all blew up simply because the developer posted this weird GIF of, "Hey, look, it's a murder train and it's chasing you." And now did it get picked up for a movie, or like I remember hearing
I
like it
think
got like
so.
blew
I
up.
think like is that merchandising already? For real. So
And
viable.
there, that is a really good question, Smith. Because I know even like a lot of like YouTubers who specifically cover horror games have felt like the market has become too commoditized. That developers are focusing on it's not about making a game, it's about making a fashion line. And about making we're gonna make stuffed toys. And that's the point. We're not trying to make a good game, we're trying to make a good, marketable IP, so it gets picked up by whoever made the I know there's FNAF
Hello
movie.
Neighbor did it. Hello
Yep.
Neighbor did it.
FNAF is at that point.
At that point.
That oh no. That Bendy game with the ink characters. Yeah, I know
Cartoon?
Iron Lung got a movie.
Iron
I
Lung.
think it's being like, is it being produced or directed by Markiplier? Is that the
Wow. Wow.
it? And again, like for a lot of developers, they view that as the metric for success. That if your game gets picked up as a major IP movie, that's how you know your game has succeeded. But again, there's a lot more going behind the scenes. So I have to ask Josh. So when is Samurai Pig going to be featured in Marvel? Like when is he going to get a quick appearance in the new Marvel
Q4.
movie?
Q4. It's guaranteed.
All right, there you go. And I guess like here, I want to throw this over to you as an indie developer. Like, what do you think when you see like games that get picked up to be a movie, or that it's now being licensed as an entire fashion line, or now the music is going to be featured in insert new movie here?
Yeah. Good for them. I don't know. It's strange. Like, and it feels like to me, I'm maybe just a bit more of a purist, right?
Mhm.
But like, I don't feel like we should. Like, yeah, we need to get our money. It's expensive, and we do hard work, but like, I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit jumping the shark and going a little too far and maybe out of our realm. I could, and maybe we should be like monetizing as much as possible, but I feel like some are merely created. They're like video games created to have an IP that's pleasurable and fits into that realm to be marketed, right? And instead of focusing on the game, so it kind of change things up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of on the fence. How do you feel about it, Josh? Let chat. How do you feel? I know there's some in here, some devs in here. I'd like to know how they feel about it.
Yeah, it just feels, excuse me, very weird.
Icky,
Yeah,
weird.
like, and it kind of again it leads to that homogenization of games, where again every game had to be a first person shooter, so that every super high energy streamer would play it. If you remember, like Doctor Disrespect saying, where are all the good games? There's no good games being released because Call of Duty didn't do well or wasn't selling 20 million copies within like a day. And I just don't. Again, it's that case of building something long term. If you're going to just sell out immediately, it oftentimes, more often than not, it doesn't lead to long lasting success. It's why, again, people are excited about Supergiant game. Supergiant does not release a game every 6 months to a year. Imagine, I think I just caused their entire course have to have a horrible chest pain if I utter those words. They release a game, when they have something that's worth releasing.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
same
when it's ready.
goes for Kid Fox and goes for Clay. And that's the kind of thing that resonates with a lot of people. They know when they get a new game from New Blood that it means, something big. It's again like it's arguably why we still hold like I think Nintendo is right now like the last kind of old guard like prestige studio
Yeah,
that when Nintendo releases a game, people turn their heads. Because again, Nintendo is not releasing a new Mario game every 8 months.
right, right, definitely. I mean, or you could go the other route and just like release every year, like Call of Duty and or Guitar Hero, and then you just end up known as an amazing franchise because you've released it so often, and we can never forget about it.
Mm-hmm. And again, to that point, when is there going to be a Samurai Pig skin in Call of Duty or
Yeah,
Fortnite?
for the Fortnite one, well, that'll be Q1 of 2024. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay, grabbing my ears. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
Q1, Q4 for the Marvel tie-in, and then Q1 2024. So
Mm-hmm.
all that's inked up. So everybody
I'm
look forward to that.
I'm still in the year 6725 right now, so I'll be happy to play those
We
eventually.
do. We have to do that. We have to have a random year generator, random date generator at the bottom, and just everybody will be done. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. So
We'll start it during the nihilism
yeah.
ones.
Mm-hmm. So I guess final points again for any developers watching this. Make sure you have a landing page for your game. Make sure you understand not only who the market is of your game, but who are the people who will cover that. And that is very simple. You can type in whatever your game, like the genre of your game is on YouTube, and look at the top people. Again, I do not make any assumptions I will be on that top 10 list, or even in the top 20, at least at this point, but that is a good place to start. Look for people who cover a variety of games. Look for anything will that they will do the job of selling your game. But you have to give them the pieces to sell it. If you even go to a small YouTuber and say, here's my game using all, sketches, there's not even any art done. Will you cover my game? A, most of them will probably say no. And B, the ones who will cover it, they're not going to be able to do much with that. If you have a solid prototype, if you have something that's amazing, and you can get that in the hands of a YouTuber, streamer, whatever, That's going to get that ball rolling. But do not assume or do not even think that someone else is going to do the marketing for you. Doesn't matter, again, how great your game is, it doesn't matter how long you spent on it. You have to do that work yourself in order to get people to start caring about your game. And like we've said, like when it works, and this kind of goes back to our original conversation, at some point, if you do this job right, you're not really considered in the same league as another indie dev anymore. You have, again, that magical word, clout, that when you say something, people will listen to it. But it takes an incredible amount of work, and it sadly can take a lot of luck sometimes to get to that point. And it's why, again, that for the developers, if you are either working at like a small or large indie studio, or if you are just like a one-person developer, if you can get to that level, the chance of you failing, I'm not even talking about succeed, I'm talking about the chance that you will fail becomes minuscule. Because again, if New Blood, Kid Fox, Clay, Supergiant, they announce a new game, not only are people going to talk about it, I will guarantee you they will get into those indie showcases and the Nintendo Directs. And unless they screw up royally, I'm talking like a No Man's Sky at launch or an Anthem or Golem, it's going to succeed. And that is very hard to do. But ultimately, I think that has to be your metric for success. You want to get to that point where the coverage comes to you, but you have to do that first.
Yeah. Well said, Josh. I mean, I can't add anything to that. I want to answer Smith's question here for both of us. I'll go ahead and go first about just basically like any generic full-time game dev course. Now, there's some things to consider, like when you're purchasing a course. Like, first of all, what is like the output project that is being produced, and if it aligns with what you're trying to make, right? Sometimes following a course can really lead you down a wrong road, bad practices, and unknown errors that you will never find until like you're done with the course, and you'll end up with nothing. What I really recommend, instead of that, like Rat's Tell, saying that he personally wouldn't do it, what I would do if you're looking to make a game, we do have a game jam coming up. So do I announce?
It's kind of in the middle of the formal announcement will be in July, but I've kind of sowed the seeds on the Discord.
So they've been sowed a little bit. So what I would recommend is like start small and start quick. So like do like smaller games that you just to get you understanding in it. If you're wanting to learn Unity, make like a Tetris game, make like a Pong game, like make a few games and get them running. Understand the UI, understand the menu, understand how everything works together first before buying a course. I'm not sure the price of the course either, and I'm not trying to like tell you not to get it, but many times you would be better suited by searching for the knowledge yourself through aligning it with your goal games that you're trying to produce, instead of following someone else's route, right? Because it's going to teach you one of the most important things, which we used to call it Google foo like 20 years ago, but now it's completely different. But it's the ability to figure out the correct questions to ask and to know them, right? You have to know the correct questions to ask, and then how to look up the information yourself, disseminate it, find out if it's correct, and then work it and run it into your game. So all of those things are not really going to be taught through a class. You're going to be fed everything. So like there's going to be many issues and steps of game dev that you won't have. Some people call it tutorial-itis or something like that. But I'll just go ahead and stop there. It's up to you if it aligns with what you're looking for. But again, I had my recommendations. Up to you if you want to follow them or not. But anyway, Josh, any ideas on that?
Yeah, the problem with like general like game design and game dev courses like that is that general doesn't do anything that's going to be unique to your situation. And as you've said plenty of times, like every developer is different. Every game design is different. If you think that, oh, if I make my platform, if my game dev process for a platformer work, I can just take that and use that same process for making a first person shooter. It doesn't work like that. And that I think with that price, I need to start my own. I really do need to make my own series on game dev courses. We have a
Yeah,
Josh teaches design volume 1 through A through Z. Just pick.
there you go.
I do have that video series of how to learn a game design that I need to get going with as well. And to that point, the problem is that a general course will kind of give you. It will probably at least give you the nuts and bolts of what it means to make a successful game. But and again, to our year, or whatever year this is right now, what was a successful game in 2016 is not going to be the same as in 2018 or in 2023 or 2193 or whatever year you're talking about. And I've heard this from a lot of, again, major names that if you try to recreate the success of a game that came out 8 years ago today, your game is going to fail. Even if that game was a Game of the Year winning title, 8, 10 years, whatever, the market has changed, and so is what people expect. And here's like the other depressing point. It also means that the kind of bottom of the barrel, that has gone up. Like, if you think again that a game that has no aesthetics, that is just literally text boxes with nothing else under them, is going to sell well, people are not going to give that game the time of day. Just as the market has expanded, so has what it means to even just come in at the barest of the bare minimum. And speaking of that, again, make sure your game has a volume slider. Because that is not a luxury feature. That is not something that you feel like, oh, I'll do it maybe. That is, again, rock bottom, foundation stuff.
Menu first. Don't forget, have your working menu first.
Well, again, it depends on that market, Rat Sale. A browser game is inherently different than having a game on a store page. But again, visuals unfortunately do matter. It's not something that I'm saying again. I have literally played pixel games that are just blocks. Blocks on top of blocks representing other blocks, and I've enjoyed
ASCII.
them. Yeah.
ASCII games, yep.
But but again, there's a difference between a success among a niche audience, a success among a general audience, and a success that reaches, levels of Markiplier covering your game.
Vince, who played Walking Simulator? Again, so drop it in chat.
But I think that is going to do it for me. So anything else from you before we say goodnight?
Kotaku, yeah. See, he ended up on Kotaku. So did it end up helping? Yeah, focus on your niche.
Mm-hmm.
Video Game Donkey also. Yeah. He moist. Wow, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of coverage there. Anyway, no, I think we've been over everything very well and articulated very well. Don't have much other to add. Other than links are down below. Wishlist Rooster Rampage, Samurai Pig. Don't forget the Marvel crossovers coming out later this year. And then next year, I forgot what we were doing. A lot going on, but it's in the video so you can scrub back and find out. Be sure to join the Discord. Leave comments below. Let us know what you want to talk about and discuss. Thanks everyone for joining us. And Josh, what do you got going?
Oh, other than that, again, the YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, check out all my books. The game design deep dive on collectible and trading card games has an official date for August 3rd. So if you want to look at lots of cards and learn all about low number design, be sure to check that out. We will
Yeah,
be
low
back
numbers.
next Saturday around 5 o'clock p.m. ET for our normal time. And if you have a topic you'd like to suggest, let us know. Let us know in the comments, on the Discord, all that good stuff. So, with that said, we'll be back later for multiplayer night. But for those of you watching, be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where you examine the art and science of games. Until next time, have a great rest of your weekend.